This is an excerpt of a recent Power Up webinar on how to create DVDs and Blu-ray discs using Adobe Encore CS6. In this excerpt, I'll show you how to export a master file or a file for DVD or a file for Blu-ray out of Premiere. We now have two options on how we want to export this. Inside Premiere CS6, we used to have the option where we would go to File and we would go down to Dynamic Link. But Adobe changed the way dynamic links work between the CS6 release and the CC release. Consequently, the CC version of Premiere does not dynamically link with the CS6 version of Encore. For this reason, the ability to quickly send Premiere projects to Encore broke with the Creative Cloud release, which means that in this case we're going to export this using File, Export, Media. Keyboard shortcut is Command M. Again, we have an option coming out of Premiere. We can either export this as high-quality media, or we can compress it. If we know going in that we're only going to be creating a DVD, or we're only going to be creating a Blu-ray disc, we can compress it for DVD, or we can compress it for Blu-ray here in Adobe Media Encoder. One of the real benefits, though, of using Encore is that you can create a single title, and by changing one button, you can switch it from being a Blu-ray disc to being a DVD, or from a DVD to a Blu-ray disc. Here, you want to have your master files, your high-quality files, be loaded into Encore, and have Encore do the rendering, the transcoding, to standard def for DVD, or high-def compressed for Blu-ray. To export a high-quality master file, check the Match Sequence settings. My file is composed of QuickTime ProRes 4:2 files, which means that I'm going to output a ProRes 4:2 sequence from Premiere, which I can then compress later. We can now go to the Video tab. Notice it's ProRes 4:2. I'm going to leave all these settings alone. We only need to worry about using maximum render quality if we're working with 10-bit media and 10-bit render files. Because DVDs are 8-bit, there's not going to be a whole lot of benefit to using this for most DVDs. Using previews and import into project and frame blending, I leave all four of these unchecked when I'm creating a master file. With audio, I leave it also uncompressed. Leave it alone. I don't make any changes. I just have it take whatever the audio is from my project, and that's what I export. So this is how I would create a master file, a really high-quality version inside Premiere, feed it through Media Encoder for use inside Encore. But we have another option. If I uncheck Match Sequence settings, now I can compress this for Blu-ray or for DVD. DVDs are always and only standard def. DVDs are also always and only MPEG-2, nothing else. So when you're creating something that's specific for a DVD, you want to make sure to select MPEG-2 DVD. This will create two files, a video file called an MPEG-2 Elemental and an audio file also called an MPEG-2 Elemental. Adobe tells me that the default settings for video compression for MPEG-2 are fine as they are. It will automatically sense your frame rate, though you may need to change the aspect ratio to match the size. Notice how it defaulted to 4:3 and was letterboxing. I changed it to widescreen, so I have a 16:9 DVD. NTSC or PAL is self-evident depending upon what you're shooting. And again, render at maximum depth can be turned off for standard def DVDs. Adobe recommends that we leave the variable bitrate 1-pass default setting alone. And they also recommend that we leave these target settings alone. I agree with their maximum bitrate. I would probably bump the target bitrate to 5.5, and I'm uncomfortable with a minimum bitrate of 2.8. I would probably move it to 4. But Adobe says you should get good results with the default setting. I'm willing to believe them. I would probably use 4, 5.5, and 7 as I look at this. The rest of the settings I would leave alone. But the audio compression settings I definitely disagree with. When they're saying the audio format is PCM, PCM means uncompressed audio. And uncompressed audio files are really big, especially when you've only got 4 gigabytes on your DVD to begin with. Always change your compression setting for audio from PCM, meaning uncompressed, to Dolby Digital. You want to make sure audio format is set to Dolby Digital. The codec is set to Dolby Digital. The sample rate and sample size are both fine. Here, with the bit rate, I would either set this to 192, which is a nice blend between voice and music. If you're doing something where music quality is really important, set this to 256. If you're doing something which is just a narrator, set it to 160. So voiceover, 160, a blend of music, say in an underscore capacity, and voice, 192. And where you absolutely positively have to get the best music quality you can, 256. There's no benefit really to going higher for a stereo or a mono clip. For today, we'll leave this at 192. Again, leave the bottom checkboxes unchecked. Notice that the size is about 29 megabytes. The master file is 650, so we're squeezing a lot of space out of that master file. If we go back to our format for Blu-ray, Blu-ray supports H.264 and MPEG-2. I can't think of a really good reason to ever use MPEG-2. It doesn't have as high a quality as H.264, and it's twice the file size. My recommendation is standard def DVD, MPEG-2. High def Blu-ray, always H.264. When I click on it, again, Adobe says the settings should be correct as they are, except you may want to make your image size smaller to save space. Here there's a raging debate. My basic feeling is if you're looking at high-def video on a 30-inch television set or less, you're not going to be able to see a difference between 720 and 1080 when they're both compressed. If you need to save space, make it 1280 720. If you've got a short, make it 1920 1080. Over the long term, we're going to be at higher resolutions, but you could use either one successfully. NBC and CBS are 1080 networks. ABC, ESPN, and Fox are 720 networks. So even on our televisions watching live events, we're watching these two different sizes. I strongly recommend you not use 1440 1080. This is the size of HDV, but it's not a good size for Blu-ray, either 720 or 1920 1080. I'm going to set this to 720 just because I want to change the setting. The rest of the settings are just ducky. Do not mess with level. Level needs to be at the default setting because there's a risk if you change the level it won't play on a Blu-ray player. Again, uncheck all the checkboxes. Moving to audio, we have exactly the same problem. You want to make sure that it is not set to PCM, which is the default. That means uncompressed. Set it to Dolby Digital. Make sure it's also checked for the codec Dolby Digital, not Surcode. And you want to leave the sample rate, channel setting alone, and the bit rate of 128 kbits per second is perfectly okay. So make sure in both standard def and high def, you're always compressing using Dolby Digital. The rest of the settings and the rest of the tabs are perfectly okay. To add it to a queue so that you can gather up all of your clips to be compressed at the same time, click Queue. To export just that one file, click Export, and it will automatically compress the file. This has been an excerpt of a recent Power Up webinar covering creating DVDs and Blu-ray discs inside Adobe Encore. For the complete version of this online training, please visit our store at larryjordan.biz/store and look for Webinar 123. Membership is a great value when you need to stretch your training dollars. A subscription membership to our video training library saves you money. You can access all of our videos for a low monthly price of only $19.99. That's more than 700 movies, hundreds of hours of training, all in-depth and all up-to-date. Plus, members can attend any of our Power Up webinars for free. Our training covers Apple and Adobe software. We update it every week, and for more information, visit larryjordan.biz/subscriptions.